All right, welcome to Legal Tech Week, our weekly journalists roundtable where we hash out the top stories or most interesting stories in legal tech and beyond that as well. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog LawSites and have the podcast LawNext. And our panelists this week are usual familiar faces, except for Molly McDonough is away this week. But let's introduce ourselves real quick. Caroline, you want to start?
Hey there, Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, global legal tech publication. We're based in the UK, and increasingly on-screen interviewer, webinar, all things live interview.
Yeah,
so it seems.
We can talk about that a little bit more, but Zach.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Zach Warren. I'm the editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News. Also see me in a bunch of other ALM publications like The American Lawyer, Corporate Counsel, Law.com, etc.
All right. Victoria Hudgins.
Hey guys, my name is Victoria Hudgins. I'm a reporter also at ALM where I write for the Legal Tech News about the intersection of technology and the law.
And Victor Lee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I am the Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal. I handle the Business of Law section, which also encompasses technology. And my usual disclaimer is I do not speak for the ABA or the ABA Journal. And today I do not speak for AT&T in case my internet goes out.
Or Major League Baseball. You're not.
Oh, I definitely don't speak for them. No.
Joe?
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the podcast Thinking Like a Lawyer and the ATL special COVID cast podcast too. And, that stuff like that.
Okay.
I got nothing else.
That's plenty. And Nikki.
I am Nicole Black, the legal technology evangelist with MyCase law practice management software. I'm a legal tech columnist and speaker. I write a monthly column for ABA Journal, biweekly column for Above the Law, weekly for the MyCase blog, and weekly for the Daily Record, among other outlets.
So we always exchange some emails in advance of the show every week discussing what we want to talk about and some of the topics that have interested us. And I've had such a crazy day today that I'm just looking at these emails now. So I wish I could say I was better organized today. But one thing I think we can all agree on as a topic of some interest is not something that happened this week, but something that's about to happen next week, which is the ILTA conference, because that is, I mean, I've always thought of it as the largest, or certainly one of the largest legal technology conferences in the world. It's always quite a production in real time, in the real world when it happens. So it's moving virtual next week. We had there was a little bit of a press briefing earlier this week where they gave us a little bit of an overview, but I mean, it's a pretty ambitious schedule they've put together. And I mean, they've got a basically 24/7 schedule over the next week, although a lot of that is kind of pre-recorded or replays of recorded sessions and other kinds of things. And they're really trying to appeal to a worldwide audience. Caroline and I are going to have a special perspective on this because we are actually going to be co-anchoring, I guess is the word. I'm using the word anchoring. I don't know if anybody else has been using the word anchoring, but Litera TV is going to be producing essentially live coverage. Like think this is the Olympics, and we're going to be sitting there with our Olympics ABC News Blazers or something, kind of trying to interview different people over the course of the week. So Caroline's going to be doing for me, the morning shift, for her, not the morning shift. And then I'll be doing the afternoon shift. So
For a 24/7 conference.
Yeah.
So
for 24,
yeah.
well,
Good job.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, most of the programming is daytime Central Time. So
Okay.
most
I'm
of
on
the
I'm
bulk
on
of
from
the
4
schedule.
to 7 BST, and Bob, you're 3 hours after each day on it. And I like to think, I've been telling everyone I'm an anchor because that sounds cool. But and then a bit more like Anchorman, the movie.
So are you saying that? So you saying that Litera TV After Dark is still available? Because I have a resume. If anybody wants, I get like the overnight shift.
I can do sport. I can do the sports update for you guys. You know?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Do you know what? We should just shift
may
this
call
panel,
on
Bob.
you.
We
Yeah,
may genuinely, quite honestly, call on you.
Uh-oh.
Avanish is on the call. He says he can make that happen. All right.
Well, it's probably going to be like I don't know if they're going to do like because like most conferences do like a 10K race or something, or like a 5K race or something, or like a 5K run like on one of the days. So you guys could do live commentary for that, like so and so sprints out to the lead and then blah blah.
Right.
Yeah, I think the idea is that we're going to do, so we're being a sensible person. So we're going to pick out, we're doing commentary and analysis from the day, and the idea is quite was a good one, and one that I share, which is that we need to, obviously ILTA has had this huge struggle of not of their own fault, of having to adjust to this virtual conference. We all love ILTA. I love ILTA anyway, going to the actual conference, and half of it is the interaction, and this year they've really struggled with how to recreate the stuff that makes people want to turn up, and actually makes people want to listen to the session. So we're Litera TV are doing this thing to try and make it interactive. We're going to hopefully be chatting to people who have spoken during the day, or just bringing our own reflection on their sessions, and genuinely I think this panel is fairly portable. I think at some point we should definitely just shift it when you need to keep your mobiles on, but
That's right.
I think but I think it's a, if you don't mind me being serious for 1 second, I'm boring, but
we kind of do mind that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to do it anyway with a beer, because that dilutes the boring. So I think that we just need to support ILTA, and I think it's a serious point, that we need to get, persuade law firms and vendors. It's as far as I'm concerned, association. There's CLOC, but CLOC hasn't. I don't think, it's not as widely representative. And I think ILTA, we need to support it, or the vendors who have paid already a load of cash to make this thing work will not be doing it again, potentially. I mean, I'm speaking very bluntly, and ILTA probably wouldn't agree necessarily with 100% that sentiment, but I think it's, I think it's a critical moment, and we're trying to do our bit, I think, to try to help it fly. That's the way I put it.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that's interesting that they've done, again, I think we've talked before about about one of the problems with the virtual conferences, trying to recreate that social aspect to it, which you really lose. And I haven't seen anybody so far do a good job of recreating that. We talked a few weeks ago about some of Nikki's ideas about how to do that using avatars. Yeah. And as far as I know, ILTA is not using avatars, but they are using we do have a couple of cool things. And I don't know and I think, Caroline, if I get it, your husband is involved possibly in one of the cool things. So
I think I, like most married couples, obviously don't talk to him an awful lot. So don't ask me for an awful lot of detail. We are working, we've tried a while to go to ILTA. We can help you to build a platform to try to connect CIOs and vendors. And the ambition is to create this platform for next week, which I should know more about, where we can do just that. The idea is that it's not good enough to just go to a virtual exhibition hall where you see the logo and you kind of go, hey, and have these, like, you actually need to make CIOs need to make their time available to the vendors in real time during the conference, and we're working on a platform, still working on it, to be honest with you, to make it possible.
You're not supposed to tell us that part.
It's really complicated, but they will be able to connect, and I think it's about, without banging on about it, but I think it's about that mentality as well, that CIOs need to do that. They need to make the time, they need to open up their diaries in real time, and they need to connect, and we're trying to we're creating the platform to enable them to do that.
Good. One other thing they're doing this thing called hallway hang, I think, if I have it right, which is sort of like chat roulette. It's like this random, you're going to go into it and just be randomly connected with somebody else who's registered for the conference for a virtual chat session. So that's interesting.
Hopefully not exactly like chat roulette.
No.
I was thinking that could go either really well or really badly.
Yeah, right. I don't know. What is that one from years ago? It's like chat roulette, but it had a different name. I think it started with an E. I think it's still around, but it doesn't always go well.
They're not usually used for conference
No.
socializing, but
You need to have some kind of something in common usually, don't you? Or, like something that makes it a valuable use of your time and theirs. I think that's the key, isn't it? You don't want to be spending just time with people just for the sake of time. We're all busy people, but if we can make it useful time, that's the key.
Yeah. So anybody else have thoughts on ILTA or virtual conferences or?
Yeah, I mean, the ABA just had its annual meeting virtual, and I mean, we were all skeptical whether that was going to work, especially with the House of Delegates vote. It's just, how do you manage something like that on such a grand scale? But in some ways, it did work better. I mean, from a reporter's standpoint, it was nice having everything available immediately, being able to, because you didn't have to worry about, did I record? Do I record the session? Do I not record the session? What if I don't take the right notes? If I don't get the right quotes or whatnot? So it's all there. You could just go back and check it immediately. So from a journalist standpoint, covering it, it worked out better than we could have imagined. But obviously it does lose something, like when it's just a bunch of basically Zoom presentations, and you have to make of it what you will. But then again, I also wonder if some of the people that we were able to get, I don't know if we would have been able to get them had it been like a live conference. I mean, like Bill Gates spoke at one of the sessions, Justice Breyer. So I mean, maybe we still would have gotten Breyer, but I don't think Bill Gates would have shown up to the ABA annual meeting. I mean, that's
right. Yeah.
Well, I got a press pass to the Connecticut Bar's Avatar conference in September, so I'll let you know how that goes. I'm excited about
the Avatar.
that.
Oh, that's the one you were talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and I have a press pass to it. I'm super excited about it. I can't wait to have my little avatar and run around. And
can you share your avatar when you got it? Can we see what you look like? I think.
Absolutely. I'm sure it'll look a lot younger and taller than I do, but we'll see. Maybe even blonder.
Yeah. I actually only went to one ABA annual meeting program, and it was a very good program, but I was surprised. I didn't actually realize during the program that it was pre-recorded. And then they got to the Q&A session at the end, and then suddenly everything stopped and it froze up for a few minutes, and then suddenly everybody came back, and they were all wearing different clothes and with different backgrounds. And I'm like, oh, I was just watching a recorded session, and now they're live at the end of it. So that was kind of an odd thing, I thought, but it worked fine. And I think they lost one of the presenters in the course of switching from one to the other. But
I'll be extremely interested, kind of getting back to Caroline's earlier point, though, what the legal tech vendor community's reaction to what actually happens next week is. Because the panels are great, very informative. I love going to them. Realistically, if I'm on the ground at ILTA, I'm probably going to one a day, maybe. I'm usually walking the exhibit hall, have predetermined meetings with people, just kind of getting the layout of the land and just kind of hearing what people are talking about as much as anything else. So especially, Bobby said earlier, this is one of the biggest legal tech shows. I think specifically for me, kind of the way that Legal Week is a primer for the first half of the year, I've always viewed ILTA as kind of the primer for the second half of the year. And I know me personally, I'm going to be losing a little bit by I'll be having a few of those conversations, but they'll be via Zoom and it won't be as impromptu. And I wonder from the other side whether that loss is going to be felt as well.
So
I'm in the...
Sorry, go. No, go, Nikki.
I was going to say I'm in the same boat as... I mean, that's why I didn't request a press pass this year, to be quite honest, because for me, that's really what this conference is about. And the other legal tech conference is next year, but I probably will go to those for different reasons or request press passes. But it's just hard for me to envision a virtual conference providing me with much of the things that I typically get from conferences as a member of the press. But I've spoken with my colleagues at MyCase about a few of the virtual conferences that we have done, and it's definitely different, and it's from the vendor's perspective, it's just a very different situation. And I'm not sure how anybody, ILTA or anyone else, is going to solve that issue with providing value in a virtual setting for the vendors. It's a tough it's tough. I mean, it's just a big
That's what
challenge.
sparked. So I spoke to a vendor. One of the things that sparked us trying to be involved and work with it was a vendor that we know very well, who said, you know, that they are feeling they're very, because obviously, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but you know, there's this very tricky situation. Obviously, they paid a lot of money, and this is why I think people don't necessarily realize, you know, in terms of law firms and organizations, how much this is really key for them now to work with the vendors. I can't stress enough that they need to make their time available. They need to, because otherwise, you know, I think that there'll be, you know, questionable return for the vendors, and then what does that look like next year, right? So I think that they need, you know, this is kind of a call to action. They need to make their time available, I think, and I know that's a real challenge with a virtual conference, but I think that, you know, people need to go kind of above and beyond what they would normally do, personally.
Yeah. So some of you may be saying there's a question here, just not a question, but it's just a comment that's saying the primary issue, this is from anonymous attendee, the primary issue for vendors is in the way ILTA has set up the exhibit halls, and it seems like the same will be for CLOC. Visitors have to seek you out to find you, no more stumbling upon a company. And this is a major exposure issue for lesser known vendors. Right. Lesser known vendors go to conferences to pick up those random walkway exposure. So,
yeah, that's
true. Well, I just want to clarify that I certainly am not talking about ILTA's plans or any other particular recent conference, and also I'm really not even speaking on behalf of MyCase, because there was a conversation very briefly in passing. So I haven't had any in-depth discussions about this. It's really more of my sense of how it typically is when you're in a booth. Typically I'm only there at tech show, but you know, just what you'd mentioned, this person mentioned about people stumbling upon, you know, a lot of it's just people wandering the exhibit halls in their free time. And I don't know how you wander an exhibit hall in a virtual setting, you know? Yeah. It's just a difficult issue.
Yeah. What about from the aspect of being a journalist, going to these things? You know, I go to conferences and I spend all day in the exhibit hall or in suites or something getting demos of products. And often I'm just like standing at a booth where I really can't even see the screen all that well or take notes. So now I've already started getting some, you know, demos of products, but I'm getting them online on Zoom, and which I much prefer a Zoom demo. Maybe they take more time to orchestrate and set up and everything, but you know, I can take notes, I can, you know, record it if I want to, or you know, whatever. So, do any of you have thoughts on that?
I feel like it has some pluses and minuses, because I definitely think you get more clarity into what a solution is. It's much cleaner. You're able to really dive in a little bit more than, like you said, just standing kind of in a corner and not really being able to sure what you're seeing. On the flip side, I found that a lot of those are very streamlined. They have the points that they want to hit. It's less of a conversation where you're really able to interject your questions and kind of learn what they're thinking a little bit more about topics that maybe aren't that particular technology. So really kind of the give and take, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the running around, I find a distraction. You know, I don't know if anybody else is quite as bad as managing their time during these conferences, but I always either, you know, usually overbook and then end up like Las Vegas a couple of years ago was the worst, where I was literally running from one appointment to the next and late and hot, and, you know, so at least this is easier to schedule in your, you know, and like you say, you know, your desk with your, just so. But then it loses that energy inevitably in that personal. Then I'm starting to love, you know, and I think we're all probably getting better at developing relationships over Zoom. You know, it feels much more natural to me now.
Yeah.
There's so many conversations that occur after hours, though, that are so fascinating to get a sense of what's happening in the industry. You know, someone else told me at the last conference, someone who was the head of a legal tech company, that, you know, it's hard staying up late, you know, as we get older, but that's where some of the best deals happen, is, you know, at 11:30 over a couple drinks. And it's just, there's a synergy there that I think is difficult to recreate online.
You can't. There's no recreating that, I think. I mean, that's the greatest loss in all of these conferences. And hopefully we get back to the before times at some point in terms of conferences.
Did you see?
Imagine being next to other people? Being next to other people and like within arm's length and having drinks and laughing at each other. And I just envision now whenever I laugh, they're just like streams of germs emanating from me. And like,
Did you
I may never have a drink with you again.
No, did you see Avanish's comment to Joe about Natera TV? He says,
Yeah.
Joe, you've got your you've got your late night slot onto Natera TV.
I know. That was when I made the sound. I realized that
I love that.
maybe my joke went too far.
No, I want this to happen. vote to make this happen.
Yeah. So maybe we should move on to some other topics here. Victor, you raised this one. It wasn't your first pick, but it was something you mentioned that I think is kind of interesting. Is the BlackBerry maybe is going to make a comeback, or what? The favorite device for years of lawyers.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I know lawyers who love BlackBerry and still love BlackBerry and have been hoping BlackBerry would make a comeback a la Crystal Clear Pepsi, although that didn't last. And I'm very disappointed about that because I'm like one of 5 people in America who love Crystal Clear Pepsi. But yeah, like I mean, and like my wife still loves her BlackBerry, like from many years ago. I mean, she obviously had to chuck it out once it, once they had the problems, and now she's using her iPhone. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I feel like BlackBerry has a certain loyalty and a certain built-in like user base, and especially for lawyers, because of the security and because of various other features that they've had that they have, they've always had that. They've always still maintained that kind of cult following, even during the bad times. So I mean, who knows? Maybe this will be something. Maybe this won't be anything. But them partnering with a startup to build a 5G smartphone. I mean, it would be an interesting alternative to some of the other phones out there, especially for lawyers.
Anybody going to switch to a BlackBerry? I mean, part of their appeal used to be in the early days was not just the keyboard, but the security. And I don't know if that is still, the issue that it once was. And I don't know what the appeal is otherwise. It seems like people are so wedded to whatever devices they're using these days, and most of them are using iPhones, that it's hard to imagine any mass exodus back to the BlackBerry.
I mean, just the idea that sorry. No, but like, yeah, just the idea that people would go back to a phone. Well, I mean, I don't know if they were designed it the same way, but like, just like if you look at the most famous BlackBerry, image, like with the keys on the front that you could actually press and whatnot. It's just now it just seems like such a quaint concept. Like, oh, who would buy a phone with actual keys when you could just touch it on your screen? So I mean, and then with the little wheel that you would like roll. I mean, I kind of liked it when it first came out, but now it seems like such an antiquated concept. Like, well, why wouldn't you just scroll?
Right. Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those things. Nostalgia is great for a product that's maybe like $20 to $30. If you're shelling out for a phone, nostalgia can only get you so far.
Yeah.
On my, I chaired the tech committee at my local bar for 3 years. I just had to give that up to go to the board of trustees. But there are 2 lawyers on it that are very tech savvy, and one was like a former programmer, and he he clung to his BlackBerry until maybe about a year ago. Like, he really liked it. He was constantly trying to work with it and keep it going because he just really liked it, and especially the security even now. And he finally switched to an Android. But there are some lawyers that still really, really like that, especially the ones that have some background in tech. So it's interesting.
So this was kind of an off week for Joe because you actually wrote about some stuff other than the law school admission test.
Yeah, which I still wrote like 6 stories about that, but I also wrote stuff about other topics. And one of the interesting ones that I wrote about this week, I thought, was Kira Systems, which does contract analysis work, actually is doing kind of a pro bono effort on their own. They're working with Campaign Zero, which is a police reform movement, to break down and use kind of their AI-driven data analytics to look at different police union bargaining agreements and to find language that they can then highlight to the press or whatever that does things that are problematic. For instance, these union agreements tend to be where you find provisions that say, oh, you can't talk to an officer who's accidentally shot somebody for quote unquote accidentally shot for like 72 hours or something like that. And those sorts of provisions are in there, and utilizing, there's hundreds and hundreds of them around the country, right? But you can plug them into Kira and it will pop through, and using its machine learning, be able to say, this one here, this language, this is clearly a provision in Bumble, wherever, that says this, which is a good tool. And then they can now put that on their website. You can search individual cities and find out what your local place does without having somebody dig through everything by hand, but with the help of Kira. And so it's nice to see a kind of legal tech do the pro bono thing. We talk about lawyers need to do that all the time, but the tools that we create can do a lot of good out there. And so I thought it was interesting that an interesting project.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, it's another example. I wrote about, and I think somebody else on this call wrote about it a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, about how e-discovery software is being used to search through COVID research, medical research literature to look for certain trends or patterns or kinds of information or whatever else. Maura Grossman, who's developed technology up at the University of, is it Waterloo? Is that where she is? I think her platform is being used. I think I wrote about it on Above the Law, as a matter of fact. Her platform is being used by medical research up there, and Relativity's technology is being used by some medical researchers in the United States. So it's interesting when you see these legal technologies designed for legal spill over into other uses. Any other insights or thoughts on that before we move on? We're seeing all the BlackBerry's users coming out in the chat here, or at least spouses of BlackBerry users. Nobody's admitting to it themselves directly.
I smell uses as well.
Yeah. Victoria, did you have anything this week?
Yeah, I saw an interesting article from my colleague at the Texas Lawyer about, they did a survey of roughly over 2,000 lawyers in Texas. They found a lot of them said they didn't want virtual jury trials for the matters. And they spoke to a judge in Texas who said she was quote unquote bummed about so many attorneys saying they didn't want to have a virtual jury trial. But she said it made the driving factor for that is that the lawyers may have clients who say they don't want virtual jury trials because they're not sure of how they can keep the attention of jurors that are just zooming in during a trial and making sure that you can make sure that you get your point across to them. So I thought it was kind of interesting to see, some people may say hey, we may see the use of virtual jury trials perhaps beyond COVID-19 for maybe civil matters, or maybe to just put a little bit less stress on the courts. And from this report and survey, it looks like attorneys do want to go back to normal and kind of having the in-person voir dire and trials. So something kind of interesting to note.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, so I reported, I think probably a few of us reported on the Florida virtual hearing, which was a one-day sort of test, as it were, albeit that it went well, and I think the judges were very complimentary to everyone involved. And they had in that case they had the jurors in the trial, didn't they? They actually had the jurors in person in the court, and then they had the evidence. I'm getting it wrong. So they had the jurors present but socially distant, and then they had the evidence. That's right, isn't it? So the evidence was virtual. So it's kind of like a hybrid. And then there's been a case in New Zealand, which was picked up on Richard Siskin's platform that talks about virtual trials, which is really worth a read. If anyone hasn't looked at it, but where they were talking about, there was a long hearing where there was a lot, I think most of the evidence was virtual, but I mean, I can just understand their concerns in terms of it's we without being derogatory, like it's a tough job being a juror and focusing for any length of time, as we know, even when you're present in court, sometimes people get reprimanded. I can understand there's concerns, and if given a choice, if you could do some kind of hybrid, which we've seen already in Florida, I think that would probably, I could understand why that would be preferable.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember, I think it was in Texas, they said like some people were multitasking while they were sitting during the questionnaires. It's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit harder to play solitary when you're in person in the courtroom than if you're just doing jury duty from your living room couch. So I can see that. And it's kind of like also interesting. Some people say to kind of like address like the workload on the courts and kind of like streamlining that. It just kind of seems like, at least for jury trials, lawyers kind of say, hey, no, we're not going to do that. So I'm always interested to see, like, of course, like in the future, what things from COVID-19 are kind of like going and using technology will the legal system continue to use, because some of it could be useful. And kind of like when you hear about the portals that are being put up so people can have access to kind of like access to justice issues and everything like that. Of course, that should continue, but it, of course, like not everything, it's not going to be a complete sea change in the legal industry.
And in terms of the evidence, that's great, right? Like that you've got people who can potentially, who are, you know, vulnerable, can give evidence, you know, and in terms of access to justice, it has ramifications in terms of opening up, you know, different ways of people not having to drag them into court necessarily if they're giving evidence. Obviously, they're very much on the spot. So I think that hopefully we'll develop some kind of hybrid. Hopefully we'll pick the best of the things that we've experiences and then ditch the ones that haven't worked so well.
I think there are positive, some lawyers are not are being a little negative and glass half empty about it. There was just an article today that sort of shows the positive side of online trials for lawyers. And I can't recall the outlet, but I linked to it in one of our emails. But it talked about how defense counsel had made a motion in I think it was a PI case, to, I think for a mistrial, because the plaintiff's attorney during a break in the proceedings had a little bit of chit chat with the jurors. And it turns out that it was about one of the jurors' backgrounds. And all that the attorney said was, oh, how do you do that? And then the juror responded about the Zoom background. And the defense counsel didn't take too kindly to that and wanted a mistrial because of that. But the judge said it was so inconsequential that it didn't matter. But like, how often do you get a chance to, I mean, I'm sure that's not going to become the norm, but it gets rid of some of those barriers that you would otherwise have in some ways. I think it might actually make lawyers seem more personable or approachable, even if you're not allowed to talk. You're never allowed to talk to jurors, but you know what I mean? They don't seem quite as removed and imposing as they are in the courtroom, I would think. Everyone's just a square on the screen. So I wonder if in some ways there's some benefits to that lawyers aren't thinking about just because they like the way it's always been.
But how do you assure quality? Like my concern would be, you know, about jurors aren't allowed to look up on the internet, for example. And when you've got, I know that at the end of it's a long trial, at the end of the day, there's nothing to stop. And a lot of it is based on trust. But, you know, I think, so I suppose, you know, I guess you have to do more trust, right? Like, so I guess there's more ability at home to be looking up information on the internet whilst you're sitting there. You know, I think there's going to be quality issues that they need to look at closely.
I was surprised they had the chat set up on that. The one, Nikki, you were talking about, I just put the link up on that. It was an ABA Journal article, but how are the jurors and the plaintiff able to be chatting with each other? You would have think somebody would have thought ahead to make sure that couldn't happen. But more horror stories from Zoom trials. But I mean, you know, despite the findings of this survey, they might have to get used to it. It's, you know, we all keep saying this is going on a lot longer than we think.
That's been the main thing when we've done articles. We've both had staff written and contributed pieces from lawyers that have actually done this. But it's never really, we're pumped about this, we're excited, this is something new. It always seems like a little bit of resignation, like, all right, this is here. I guess if you got to do it, here's how you're going to do it. Nobody, I guess, is as excited for the change as I thought that they might be ultimately.
Yeah.
And who knows, a lot of it just might be just, you know, just the usual resistance to change in the legal profession in general. Like, hey, this is how we've always done it. This is how we were trained to do it. This is how, what we saw on television growing up. This is what we went to law school for, with trial ad and blah, 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 and moot court. And, this is how we've gotten used to doing it. And anything that kind of deviates from that is going to be, if not resisted, is going to be kind of like, well, I prefer we go back to things the way we are once the way they were once, things have calmed down. So, I mean, that could be part of it too. Just the whole, just the attitude of like, well, this isn't how we were trained to do it. This is how, what we wanted to do our lives. We wanted to be in court. We want to be front and center in front of a jury and giving our arguments, and anything that kind of takes away from that, it's going to be, looked at suspiciously.
Well, and that's one thing also, is that trial lawyers, like the people who are really trial lawyers, not just litigators who occasionally go to trial, but like the real trial lawyers, are those kind of people who have that overinflated sense of instinct. Like the baseball managers who don't look at statistics, but, have a gut feeling about a guy like that. That's what trial lawyers are like. And I absolutely think they're the sort of folks who are like, I can't get a feel for a jury, but when I'm in a room with them, I can connect. And it's like complete nonsense, but it's the thing that their whole mythos of their personality is based around.
It's not nonsense, though. When I was a public defender, I did a lot of trials. And you can just tell by the way someone looks at you. It's body language. And you don't care what you don't care what the answers to the questions are. You want to get a sense of how they're looking at you, how they're responding. And that's how you can tell if they're going to listen to you. That's all you want, is someone who's going to be receptive to what you're saying. And it's much harder to do over Zoom. So I would think, how do you assess body language? How can you tell? What I could have my legs crossed right now, my arms, crossed, and I could totally be resistant to what you're saying, and you wouldn't be able to tell.
You could really not even be in a room with those books. Like, that's also a thing that could be.
I might even be on my deck, but I could even be a dog. It's like that old internet. What's that saying? The internet doesn't know you're a dog. Yeah. No one knows you're a dog. Yeah. But as much as I'm like, lawyers aren't looking on the bright side, and I can't imagine doing a trial over Zoom. But I don't know.
No. So Nikki, you had a couple of other stories. Do you want to pick one of those out to talk about, or?
Well, the first one I read was just a bunch of statistics, but I feel like I've talked about that before. And the other one that really caught my eye subsequent to that was Sharon Nelson from the the blog called Ride the Lightning, posted a link to. She just posted a short post with a link to a ZDNet blog post about the 20 most dangerous crimes that artificial intelligence will create. And that really caught my eye because AI is so interesting to me, in the intersection of AI and the law, both in terms of what it can do for lawyers in their practice, but also how it intersects with criminal. I was a criminal defense lawyer, so I'm always fascinated about those things. And so I was just super interested in the different crimes that they talk about. And there were really 4 categories. AI-enabled crimes of high concern, which include deepfakes, driverless vehicles as a weapon, tailored phishing, disrupting AI control system, large-scale blackmail, and AI-authored fake news. Then there's AI-enabled crimes of moderate concern, misuse of military robots. I kind of feel like that should be high concern.
I feel like that should be a little bit.
Not moderate, but snake oil, data poisoning, learning-based cyber attacks, autonomous attack drones. Again, I feel like that's of high concern. Autonomous attack drones, denial of access to online activities, tricking face recognition, and manipulating financial or stock markets. That also seems like a high concern one to me. And then last but not least, low concern. Burglar bots, evading AI detection, AI-authored fake reviews, AI-assisted stalking, forgery of content such as art and music. But so it just was interesting to me, all these categories, some of which I'd certainly never thought about. And I feel like I think about this a decent amount, especially because of all the sci-fi I've watched. But I just thought it was interesting. So many different areas of AI's got so much potential for good and so much potential for bad. So that really caught my eye.
I'm not sure how AI generated fake news is a crime, but that's a whole other issue, I guess.
But with the GPT-3 stuff, that was the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that came out, the potential for you to just sort of give it a few bullet points and then it produce a whole bunch of complete nonsense, and then to flood Facebook or to flood whatever platform it is, with a whole bunch of fake news, which when you're talking about within the context of a political campaign or whatever it might be, Bob, you're laughing. Yeah, so I think it could be, I understand why that's a big concern, because the sheer volume that it can create, the human being, obviously we're limited, this is not.
I think I mentioned this before, but one of my sons in the earlier version of GP3, whatever it's called, took all of my above the law columns and fed them in, and then tried to generate a column, and it came out complete nonsense, which I think means it was probably exactly right. So.
Yeah, no, I was talking, especially in the political end, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I am shocked we have not had a major deepfake video scandal so far in this political cycle. I think it still might be coming. It would not surprise me. But the possibilities, especially with what you see with your eyes or what you hear with your ears, stuff that has always been very straightforward in the past, AI could very easily kind of throw into doubt. So criminal, I don't know necessarily what the laws are there, but definitely worrisome, I would say.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, I feel like America is so polarized that, like, I mean, if you hate Donald Trump and there's a deep fake video of him like shooting somebody in the head, I think most people would be like, oh yeah, that, like people that hate Donald Trump would be like, oh yeah, I believe that. And then there could be like a video of, if you hate Joe Biden, there could be a video of Joe Biden shooting somebody in the head, and people would be like, oh yeah, see, I knew it. So it's almost like, I almost feel like we've gotten to the point where it's like, even if the deep fakes are becoming more sophisticated and more, difficult to discern from real authentic videos, in terms of like the actual impact for a large portion of the electorate, it wouldn't really make a difference. Obviously, there are people in the middle who it might sway one way or the other, but and whatnot. But I almost feel like, given where the country is, there would be large portions of people that would just automatically dismiss it anyway, like even if it was a very good fake.
Yep. Zach, I don't think you had anything, or did you have any story this week you want to talk about?
Oh, mine was just talking about ILTA, which we did off the top.
All right, we did that. The only thing I was going to talk about, speaking of AI, I kind of thought the Thomson Reuters news this week about its quick check judicial version was a little bit interesting. I mean, we've all been hearing about these, brief analyzer products that have been out there ever since Case Text introduced Kara. Just about everybody at this point has come out with their version of that, where you upload a document and it tells you, what cases you're missing or what cases might not be good law or whatever. And Westlaw has its own version of that, which came out last year. But they just introduced this quick check judicial, which is basically designed for judges to say, okay, I've got these 2 briefs, and now I upload the 2 briefs, and I can look at, this is going to tell me what cases they have in common, what cases are different, what cases neither of them have, which cases are bad law, good law. So it's an interesting, it'd be interesting if judges start using that. And of course, their whole pitch around this is really that, if judges are using it, then don't you want to be using it too? Because you want to know before you upload this before you send this to the judge, what they're going to find when they upload this into the system. And Thomson Reuters does have, a contract with at least the federal courts for all federal judges to have access to it. That doesn't mean they're using it, but the judges certainly do have access to it. I'm sure some state court judges do too. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Well, I think it's a really interesting iteration of that super innovative concept the Case Text came up with. They really are coming up with, Case Text has come up with some really creative, innovative ideas that others are leapfrogging from. And I think that way of taking that and providing it with a tool for judges is super innovative and interesting in and of itself. So I kind of like to see all these different iterations of different concepts. And I always have admiration for the people that, or the companies that come up with those concepts initially that sort of light a spark in everybody else. And, I think kudos to Case Text, because I feel like they've done that, and it's kind of hard to do that in the legal tech industry sometimes. to do things different than how they've always been done. And I just like to see it sort of push out into the rest of the industry. And then other people come up with really interesting ways of doing the same thing in a different way. So it's kind of exciting to see that, especially in the legal research area, because that's been the same way for such a long time.
So I'm not overly familiar with the Quick Check story, but we've talked a lot about bias and how decisions are, I mean, would this be, well, obviously when you're talking about judges relying on it, I guess that question would have to arise. Is that something that's relevant here? I would have thought that you'd need to be very clear about how it was helping, or is it not particularly relevant in this situation?
I don't.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't see, this is a situation where they're using natural language processing to compare documents, and bias is usually, I think bias creeps into coding in a multitude of ways. But in this particular case with natural language processing in the legal context, just comparing two docs, it's hard for me to see how bias creeps in, but I may not be, there may be something I'm missing on that.
Yeah, I mean, they build this as an AI product, but it's minimal AI. There's some natural language processing to it, but it's really just almost a very glorified document comparison tool. I'm sure it's more sophisticated than that. And I mean, you talk about case text. I actually noticed, Pablo Arredondo from Case Text, who developed, their Kara, praising this product as being cool on Twitter. So there's certainly something there. But
there's interesting comments about it.
Because of the model and transiting data training. So. It's interesting. I think we understand more. I mean, I don't know the first thing about Quick Check, but I think we understand more, don't we, as we start to sort of interrogate this. And I guess it's sort of incumbent on all of us to sort of just ask the question. but I take your point. It sounds like it's it'd be interesting to develop that theme more and understand more what you mean about that bias kicks in.
Yeah, I would also just follow up on Nikki's point. I about startups coming up with creative ideas that then get followed by others in the industry. I think that's such an important theme over just the last, 5-10 years. Well, not 10 maybe, but at least the last 5 years of there. It used to be, and I've kind of written about this before, but it used to be, it was often, Thomson Reuters or LexisNexis that would sort of come out with something new, and then smaller companies would try and follow suit and come up with something similar. And now it's these smaller startups, that are this kind of scrappier companies that are coming up with these really clever ideas, and then the big companies are all following them and following suit. That's part of the reason this field, this industry is so interesting right now, because there's just so much creativity coming out of these smaller companies. Anything else anybody want to talk about? I don't know if Caroline and I are going to be here next week. Are we going to be here next week? I think
my session on Friday might finish just in time, actually, but no, and then yours is after, so probably will have to. I
think I bump right up against this next week. So.
Yeah.
But
then we'll have a lot to talk about the following week.
Yeah.
Or this is Friday is when all of us congregate there. You can gate crash my one.
That's right. You can all come to our. We can overlap a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I hope everybody has a very good weekend and has some fun over the weekend. And we will probably be back. We're scheduled to be back next week at 3:00, and maybe we will. We'll surprise you. Good.
No, have a nice weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice weekend, guys.
You too. Bye.